I never believed a single night could rewrite the quiet rhythm of a marriage. But now, I can trace every fracture in my life back to that weekend, to a question that was never meant to be answered seriously. My name is Adam. I'm 35, married for 8 years to Rachel, a woman who once made every room feel brighter just by being in it. We met in college, fell in love too fast, married too young, and built a life that, from the outside, looked nearly perfect. We had good jobs, a modest home, friends who envied our stability. But behind closed doors, something had begun to fade, not love exactly, but warmth. Our conversations had become logistical checklists, bills, groceries, deadlines. Nights passed with us on opposite sides of the couch, phones glowing where our faces used to. We weren't fighting, we were just quiet. Then came the Millers, Jake and Emily, a couple we'd grown close to over the last 2 years. Jake was everything I wasn't: outgoing, impulsive, effortlessly charming. Emily, his wife, carried herself with a kind of soft confidence, the kind that made you want to understand what she was thinking. Together, they made marriage look fun again, like it still had mystery left in it. So when Jake invited us to a cabin weekend for his birthday, no kids, no responsibilities, just laughter and good wine, it felt like the escape Rachel and I desperately needed. The first night started harmlessly enough. Music, food, the crackle of the fire, and then, as the wine emptied, the jokes started. Jake, with that trademark grin, leaned back and said, "You ever wonder what it'd be like to switch things up? Just for one night?" Rachel laughed, shaking her head, but there was a flicker in her eyes, a glint of curiosity I hadn't seen in a long time. Emily said nothing, only sipped her drink and looked at me with a gaze I couldn't quite read. The air shifted then, the kind of charged silence that follows a dare you secretly want to take. I should have broken it with a laugh, made it all go away. Instead, I said something that would haunt me long after the glasses were emptied. Would it really be so bad to find out? The room went still. Jake smirked. Rachel stared. Emily's lips parted, just slightly, not in shock, but intrigue. And in that single moment, before anyone spoke again, I felt the ground beneath my marriage begin to tremble. The morning after that conversation, the air between us felt different, taut, like a string pulled too tight. No one mentioned what had been said. We pretended the night before had been nothing more than drunken humor, but every glance, every silence, carried the memory of it. Jake was the first to break the illusion of normalcy. "So," he said over coffee, his grin casual but deliberate, "we all survived the wine, right?" His tone was playful, but his eyes lingered on Rachel just a second too long. She laughed, stirring her cup, yet I could see the faint pink rising on her neck. It wasn't jealousy that struck me, it was confusion. When had we become people who could laugh about something like that and mean it, even just a little? I tried to shake it off. We spent the afternoon hiking through the woods that surrounded the cabin. Rachel walked ahead with Emily, their laughter echoing between the trees. Jake and I trailed behind, our conversation light, meaningless. But as I watched the women, their shoulders brushing, their voices mingling, I felt a strange detachment, as though I were observing someone else's life. When we returned, the sun was low and the cabin glowed with the warm orange of dusk. Emily offered to make dinner, Rachel joined her. From the kitchen came the clatter of plates, the sound of two women who looked comfortable, too comfortable, with one another's husbands nearby. Jake poured us each a drink and sank into the couch. "You know," he said, his voice low, "I wasn't kidding last night. Sometimes people need to reset. Remind themselves what it feels like to be wanted." I looked at him, unsure if he was provoking me or confessing something real. "And you think that helps?" I asked. He smirked. "Sometimes it does." His words hung there, weighty and dangerous. I could hear the laughter from the kitchen, Rachel's laughter, and realized how long it had been since I'd heard it sound that free. When dinner was served, the four of us sat around the table, the conversation lighter than it had been in months. The wine flowed, the candles flickered, and every small touch, a brush of fingers, a shared glance, seemed to carry a new electricity. By the time dessert was finished, the boundaries between us had softened into suggestion. Emily's knee brushed mine under the table. Rachel leaned closer to Jake as she poured him another glass. No one said a word about it, but we all knew. Something unspoken had been set in motion, slow, quiet, unstoppable. And as I watched Rachel smile across the table, I couldn't tell whether I wanted to pull her closer, or let her drift away. That night, the cabin seemed to breathe with its own rhythm, the whisper of wind through pine, the low hum of music, the crackle of firelight painting shadows across the walls. We'd spent the day pretending nothing had changed, but now the pretense was gone. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm. Rachel sat beside Jake on the couch, their shoulders nearly touching. I caught her stealing a glance at him, quick, nervous, but not unwilling. Emily, across from me, tilted her head, her eyes finding mine through the dim light. There was a challenge in that look, one part curiosity, one part invitation. Every instinct told me to stand, to say something that would anchor us back to sanity. But instead, I stayed. I listened as Jake joked, as Rachel laughed, as Emily's hand brushed against my arm and lingered there just a second too long. The conversation drifted, lazy and dangerous. Jake, always the instigator, leaned forward. "You ever think about how people change?" he said. 8 years married, and you start missing the version of yourself you used to be. Rachel nodded before she could stop herself. "Sometimes I feel like I forgot who that woman was," she murmured. Her words pierced deeper than she knew. I wanted to reach for her, to remind her she was still the same woman who danced barefoot in our kitchen on our first night together. But I didn't move. Emily leaned closer, her voice soft. "Maybe we all just want to feel seen again." That single sentence shattered what little distance remained. It was Emily who touched my hand first, but I didn't pull away. Jake's eyes flickered toward us, and I realized he wasn't surprised, almost as if he'd expected it. Rachel looked between us, her lips parting in disbelief, then closing again without protest. The silence that followed was thick with understanding. No one said yes, but no one said stop either. Later, when Rachel and Jake disappeared upstairs, I sat frozen beside the fire, unsure if I'd just watched my marriage end or transform into something unrecognizable. Emily sat close enough for me to feel the warmth of her skin. "You don't have to overthink it," she whispered. "It's just one night." But even as I nodded, I knew she was wrong. Some nights don't fade. They echo. They stain. And as her lips found mine, I understood that whatever happened next, whatever version of Adam existed after this, he wouldn't be the same man Rachel married. When dawn crept through the cabin windows, the world felt unnaturally still, as though the forest itself held its breath. The fire had died to grey embers, and beside me, Emily stirred quietly beneath a blanket that wasn't mine. For a moment, I couldn't move. My body felt heavy, my mind numb. The weight of what I'd done pressed against my chest like a second heartbeat. Upstairs, I heard movement, soft footsteps, a door closing, then silence. I didn't need to look to know it was Rachel. I dressed slowly, each motion deliberate, as if dragging time might undo the night. Emily sat up, her voice husky. "We said it was just one night," she whispered, watching me. "I know," I said, though the words tasted hollow. Nothing about it felt simple anymore. When I stepped outside, the air was cold, biting. The trees were soaked with morning light, beautiful and indifferent. For the first time, I felt the full distance between who I was yesterday and who I'd become overnight. Rachel was sitting by the lake, her hair pulled into a loose knot, her arms wrapped around her knees. I wanted to say her name, to tell her I was sorry, but how do you apologize for something you both silently allowed? She didn't look up when I sat beside her. The reflection of the sunrise shimmered across the water, fractured and trembling, like us. After a long silence, she said, "Did you think it would fix us?" Her voice wasn't angry. It was quiet, resigned, the tone of someone who already knew the answer. "No," I said. "I think I just wanted to feel something again." Rachel nodded, her eyes glossy but dry. "I did too." That was the hardest part, realizing we'd both reached for someone else not out of malice, but out of emptiness. We'd tried to fill the space between us with other people, thinking it would make the distance smaller. But it only stretched it wider. When we drove home that afternoon, the silence was suffocating. The radio played softly, but even the music sounded foreign. Emily's perfume lingered faintly on my skin. I could feel Rachel's presence beside me, but it was as though we were separated by miles. Every glance out the window felt like confession. Every mile closer to home felt like punishment. By the time we reached our driveway, we weren't husband and wife anymore, just two strangers carrying the same secret. And deep down, I knew the hardest part wasn't that it happened. It was that a part of me didn't regret it, not yet. It's strange how silence can become a language. Weeks passed after that weekend, and Rachel and I spoke less and less, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. The kind of tired that seeps into the bones, where words feel useless because both people already know too much. We tried to pretend. Dinners resumed, laundry folded, alarms set, all the quiet routines that make a marriage look alive from the outside. But beneath every gesture was a ghost. Every touch felt cautious, borrowed. I could still feel Emily's breath against my skin sometimes, like an echo I couldn't shake. One evening, while washing dishes, Rachel finally spoke. "I keep thinking about her," she said. "And him. About how it felt." Her voice trembled, but she didn't look at me. I waited, unsure whether she wanted forgiveness or permission. Then she turned, tears threatening but never falling. "I don't hate you, Adam. I just don't know who we are anymore." Neither did I. I'd always imagined betrayal as a single sharp moment, something that breaks cleanly. But this was slower, quieter. It wasn't the act itself that destroyed us, it was the realization that the people we used to be were already gone before that night began. Therapy came next, not as a fix, but as a lifeline. The counselor asked us to describe what we missed most about each other. Rachel said she missed how I used to listen, not just hear, but listen. I said I missed the way she used to look at me like she saw more than who I'd become. We're still trying. Some days are hopeful, others heavy. Sometimes she reaches for my hand while watching TV, and for a fleeting second, it feels almost normal again. Other nights, the space between us feels wider than ever. Emily and Jake divorced 2 months after the trip. I heard about it through mutual friends, but I didn't reach out. There's nothing left to say that wouldn't sound like an excuse. Now, when I think about that night, it feels less like a memory and more like a turning point, the place where two people finally stopped pretending everything was fine. Love doesn't always vanish with anger. Sometimes it just fades, quietly, until you wake up beside someone who remembers the same story differently. Rachel and I still share a bed, still share a life, but every morning, I wonder if love is something you rebuild, or something you learn to live without. Because some choices don't destroy you all at once. They just keep whispering, reminding you that once, for one night, you crossed a line you can never uncross.